I am firm in the belief that Genshin Impact's community doesn't deserve all the hate that it gets. I understand where a lot of individuals' disdain for the community comes from, but I don't think it's properly aimed. For a lot of individuals, myself included, one of the biggest things is we do like Genshin Impact as a game. We do recognize its faults and we do understand that it could be better in some ways, but a lot of us do legitimately just enjoy the experience. That, however, becomes a problem when you consider trying to discuss that game in comparison to any others, or when you attempt to discuss that game when there's others out there. Genshin Impact, compared to many other gachas, is extremely popular, but at the same time, that popularity ends up as a detriment to a lot of players because it's much more difficult to actually be able to discuss and legitimately talk about why or if you enjoy the game itself. And if you're considering trying it, it's even more difficult to find a valid opinion or even a reason to attempt to because of how often people decide to trash in the community as a whole. This isn't meant to be saying that the entire Genshin community is amazing and it's wrong to say they're bad. What I mean is the discourse around the community itself isn't properly justified, and it subsequently also ruins a lot of individuals' enjoyment of the game. One of the main things I want to consider is that if you're a new player to the game, or maybe you're someone who's been playing long term but you want to find friends who play, it's very difficult to mention it, because being a Genshin player is viewed as a much more negative thing in comparison to others. But we've seen a very large resurgence in this in terms of how people view the Genshin community as a whole with the release of Honkai Star Rail. It seems like Star Rail's release ended up reinvigorating a lot of individuals' hate and disdain for the Genshin community, despite that community vaguely, to some degree at least, transferring over. Most individuals who play the game recognize that some of the worst parts of the Genshin community are Twitter. In general, it's Twitter. Twitter's awful as a whole, let's be honest here. Who realistically gets onto Twitter and doesn't just use it for porn? We all use Twitter for different things, art, maybe to avoid your own community. My Twitter is in Japanese. I cannot read Japanese, but it's how you avoid a lot of the more negative aspects of things. But I think when you attach that same label and disdain for the Genshin Twitter side of things to the whole community, it makes the aspect and concept of even talking about the game very difficult. If you enjoy the game, you usually want to share your experiences with others, but it's very difficult to do that when everyone dislikes the game, or at least most individuals dislike or appear to dislike the game. Criticism is entirely different from just outright blatant hate. And if you play the game and have played the game and you have issues with it, that's perfectly fine. The difference between that is you've actually played the game. If you've never played the game and just hate on it because it's there, then your opinion isn't valid at that point. Because if the argument boils down to haha gotcha bad, then there's no point in discussing it because realistically you were never going to play it, so why does it matter? And if you played it and dropped it, that's perfectly fine, but don't let your perception dull or in any way, shape, or form hamper the experience of another person, because they could legitimately enjoy and have fun with the game, or maybe just get into it, but if they hear so much negativity around it, they won't play it. Genshin Twitter, though, does get a bad reputation, and it's pretty deserved. Aside from the art community, which usually is pretty chill in every game, Genshin Twitter does like to essentially witch at individuals for disliking something, or for shipping, or for how they draw a character, or what they say. It's an incredibly awful experience. And this applies to the VAs as well. Genshin Twitter does not treat the VAs nicely, but I'm gonna be honest, some of the VAs are kind of a bitch. I just don't think that the whole of the game's community should be viewed as awfully and as deplorable as the Twitter side of the community, because even though, yes, the Twitter side of the game is a part of that game's community, it's not the whole of it to the extent to where you can loop them in together. It's fine to say Genshin Twitter is bad, but it's not necessarily the same to say Genshin community is bad, because they're not one in the same. The entirety of Twitter does not encompass the whole of Genshin community. But outside of just that, we also have to talk about why people dislike it. And there are a multitude of reasons. If we're just focusing on the gacha model, that's give or take. You can be extremely lucky and say this game is amazing, the gacha is nice, but you can be extremely unlucky and say any gacha game is trash because you just don't get luck. So I won't speak on that. In terms of the game has no content, that is a bit more subjective than a lot of people think. Because you can define content as, do you want hard, difficult bosses to do? Do you want things you can do that don't necessarily need resin? Are you a casual or a hardcore player? Because if you're a casual player, you have TCG, you have fishing, you have the Serenity Pot, you have all the side quests. If you're talking about just general things you can do, you have a multitude of things. Exploration alongside that, which I mentioned, alongside building and min-maxing your characters. That can be an end goal for you. So endgame content can't explicitly just be limited to the Abyss, because a lot of individuals don't really care for the Abyss. Yes, it's fun to test, but realistically speaking, how many individuals are going in there consistently enough for it to matter? Or how many individuals just get 33 stars or 30 stars and say this is alright. And I think a lot of that no content discussion can come, and probably does at least to a degree, come from players who've been playing for an extremely long time, over a year, maybe since launch. Because a lot of us have been with the game through the release of each region, we've probably done a vast majority of the content that is available in each region. But hypothetically speaking, if you were to start right now today in Genshin Impact for the first time, you have a lot to do. You have the entirety of Mondstadt's arc alongside the character story quest. You then have Liyue, you then have Inazuma and all of the quests associated with that, the Sacred Sakura Tree. You then have the entirety of Sumeru's extremely long quest like the Aranara quest and the Desert quest and the other Desert quest. And did I mention that third Desert quest? And so in that instance, it's all about perspective. And I don't want to say every issue with Genshin boils down to perspective, but a lot of the issues do boil down to your perspective and how long you've been playing. If you've been playing from the beginning, you likely have your main team done, you likely have your favorite character at least for now, unless they're a standard banner character, in which case you probably cry each day. So you can theoretically set a lot of end goals. If you are starting out, you do have a lot of characters you can want. You don't have a Bennett, you don't have all these units that we take for granted because we've had them so long. Content may feel legitimately difficult to you, but for a lot of us who have minimaxed thus far, yeah, content may seem easy, and if that is the case, then yeah, there can and should subsequently be harder difficulties. But if that's the case, then subsequently any new players also missing out on those harder rewards. If we're talking about time getting limited time events, I'm not gonna lie, that's just awful. It still sucks. I can't defend that, because let's be honest here, no one likes logging on, getting into this nice event. You get into this groove where you like the story, or you like the characters and the event, and subsequently you're like, hey, why don't you wait 17 more hours for part 2, and then 32 more hours for part 3, and then how about you wait half a week? You know, I haven't done the current event in Genshin, at least at the time of recording this video on the 6th. I have not done it yet, and I refuse to do it until like there's 1 day left, and then I just decide to blitz through it. But I've also been playing Honkai Star Rail. But I do think that a lot of individuals look at Genshin and say, oh yeah, it's a casual game and it's for children, but there are certain aspects of the story that are darker, and realistically, if we're thinking about it as a whole, what do people legitimately want from the game long term? And subsequently, how long have they played to validate their opinion? If you played 5 minutes and didn't like it, you didn't like it, sure, but you also didn't play it enough to give it a chance. But hey, that is just my opinion. I don't think Genshin community is awful. I don't think it's god awful. I think there are certain parts you hate. I hate the shipping. I hate the simping. I hate I'm not gonna lie, I hate a good 70% of you people. Not you watching this video, of course. You're pretty cool. You should subscribe. But a good portion of the rest of you assholes, I hate. But I don't nearly hate you guys as much, or I don't nearly hate the Genshin community as much as I hate others. I don't hate them as much as I hate the ArcNets community. But I think that honestly can depend on your interaction. I think the Honkai community is worse, at least from the perspective of a Genshin player. I think that every gacha game community is worse to each other, unless you're talking about Blue Archive, who are just pretty chill. And Azure Lane. So to that effect, if you're just getting into Genshin, I honestly would recommend trying the game out for yourself before attempting to find a community. That way you have your own opinions of the game before listening to somebody else's. And if you maybe quit Genshin because of the community, you don't necessarily have to interact with that community. You do realize that, right? There's an option that just leaves with you not interacting. That is a thing. That's my thoughts. What are yours? Give me yours down below. I'm a Genshin player. I'm a Honkai player. I am a Blue Archive player. What are you?